Yup. What's up, guys? I'm back again with another video. Um, Thank you for tuning in. Today's topic, we're going to be talking about why certain people born into certain circumstances may think it's a negative thing, but it's actually like a positive light. And I don't really have much. I don't really have much recorded for this video. I don't really have much prepared for this video. I'm just gonna speak from my own personal experiences, as I have for most videos. But today we're gonna be talking about why being born poor or in the ghetto or in poverty or like why that kind of thing is actually a blessing in disguise, right? And I'm sure for a lot of people who are more mature than me, more older than me, and have made something of themselves and have done something with their lives, they've this is kind of something that you kind of grew up you kind of learn the more older you get, that actually growing up like this is actually like a hidden blessing in disguise, right? But for many years, like I guess you could say decades, growing up life was not easy. It was definitely not easy. It was very tough. A lot of bumps, a lot of hiccups, a lot of roadblocks, a lot of everything, and that just made me feel personally like life was against me or out to get me or out to get my family, or just that people like me were just not meant to succeed or be successful, right? And growing up like it's easy to feel that way, especially when you're a kid, you're young, um black, immigrant from a different part of the world, a different country. I'm not saying that other people don't have different circumstances, right? Because you could be old, white, and fucking native and still have like a different life or a difficult life. I don't know, I can't speak to that, I can't attest to that. I can speak about my own life experiences. But what I do know is that when you, it's like a metal or a iron or stuff like that. Some types of materials and some types of things are tempered. Tempered meaning that they become used to a certain type of heat, right? And they become more malleable, which means more easy to maneuver, more easy to work with, more easy to bend, and more easy to mutate to a certain type of heat or exposure to a certain type of temperature. Sorry about that, guys. But yeah, but growing up in strife and in poverty makes you more malleable, whereas compared to kids who grew up with, like posh lifestyles, having everything they wanted, they're not as malleable. So when you go out in the real world, and the real world is kind of like the hammer that hits the iron and bends it into the shape that it wants to be or it needs to be, or that the world wants of it or whatever, right? You're more able to change and meet the expectations of the world, even though meeting the expectations of the world and of other people aren't what you're put in the world for. But your life was so hard at one point that what you stands before you now is not that difficult. It's not, it pales in comparison, right? Versus other kids who never had a hard life all their lives, right? For them, like the smallest things they see is difficulty, right? Growing up in the hood, growing up in the ghetto, where like finding food to eat, finding sustenance, getting from your house to school was like a mission, or was like, like a fucking survival training every day. Like those things are like those things kind of condition you. And yes, they do condition you in sometimes in a bad way, in a negative way, but for the most part, that's the survival instinct baked into you, right? And that only comes from being raised in poverty, being raised in the ghetto. Like a lot of you really gain a lot of culture when you live when you come from like poverty or poverty stricken areas. Like a lot of culture comes from there. A lot of like I don't know, a lot of music, a lot of like art, a lot of dance, a lot of style comes from poverty, because the less people have is the more they have to think to come up with different stuff, to come up with other shit, to be creative, to find ways to express themselves. Like, like for me growing up in Jamaica, like the less we had didn't matter because we were even more imaginative, we were even more creative, and we were even more compelled because we had less, right? And that doesn't just happen overnight. That's something that happens because you grew up having so much time of not having anything that you've learned to give yourself the thing that you don't have, even if it's temporarily, even if it's only in your mind. You've learned to give yourself that thing because nothing's gonna really stop you from having what you want. Oh fuck. Yeah, when I do these videos, I do them like talking really, you can tell talking for a long periods of time is just exhausting, especially when I talk about shit that I care about. But needless to say, yeah, these things like growing up like that, growing up in a situation where you only have like one parent, single parent household, or if you grow up with your moms and your dad, seeing your family struggle, right? It really like it really sets a precedent for you, and it sets your life up in a way that these are the things that you do not want to see happen to yourself. You do not want to see this happen to your parents. You do not want this to happen to your kids, right? So poverty is almost like a blessing in disguise because it brings your future it brings your future right in front of you. Well, yeah, pretty much what I'm saying. It brings your future right to your present and it's saying to you, like, what are you going to do to change this? If you don't do anything, this is going to be your future. This is going to be who you are. And more often than not, most people choose to do things, to do something to change their life. They work hard, they study, they go to school, they get a degree, they get that job, they start that business, they start that profession, they start their career pursuing art or something. Some people even do crime, do illegal shit. Any way to make it work is how that's the mindset that you're kind of raised in, especially when you're raised in like the ghetto and when you're raised in like poverty stricken areas, right? Like you got to get it how you live, or you just got to live with what you got. It's that simple. There's no tutus, there's no complications here, right? And it kind of gives you a different type of demeanor, right? It makes you more, is demure the word I'm looking for? It makes you more decisive. It makes you more intentional. It makes you less giggly and laughy and jokey around everybody. It makes you more intentional. It makes you more direct, and it makes you have clear goals and clear things you want to achieve. Even if you don't know what you want to do with your life or passion or whatever, you know that you want to get out of this. That's your passion project, right? That's what you're working on, right? You know that because of the situation that you were raised in before. So you know that 100% fact. I don't care if I make it this way, that way. I just got to make it. That's what you know. And that's what was raised into you. So when you do make it, you're like, okay, maybe I can focus on something else after. That's after the fact, right? But it gives you that drive. It definitely does. It also tends to make you more appealing. It gives you a lot of sex appeal when you're raised in these types of areas, when you're raised in these types of situations. In my opinion, it gives you a lot of sex appeal, right? You stand out from the competition simply because simply because you don't have to try to be something that you're not. You just are who you are, and you attract people who fuck with that. It just so happens that we're in a culture, we're in a situation where the new young people, the new girls of today are kind of they're raised in the culture that was a direct result of all the shit that happened in the early 2000s, like all the 50 Cent, all the Kanye, all the J. Cole, all the Lil Wayne, all the Eminem, all the DMX. That shit was hood as hell, right? So they're raised from that culture. That culture gave birth to the new rappers, and they're raised from that new rap culture, right? And all that culture preaches is poverty in the streets, get it how you live, or live with what you got, do whatever it takes mentality. So if you were raised in that situation, like you automatically gain sex appeal simply because your life is not a joke to you. You actually have to do this to get what you need, which means automatically you don't focus necessarily on females or on women. They focus on you, right? That's how life works. If you don't focus on something, that thing focuses on you. It just doesn't just disappear, right? Because you're chasing other things, they start chasing you naturally, right? That's why it says it just gives you more sex appeal. It gives you more of a, you're not going to notice it because it's not something that's really important to you, because you're busy trying to figure out how to get out of the gutter. You're busy trying to figure out how to make bread. Like, you really wouldn't give a fuck what these girls think, because honestly, nothing matters more to you than making money and making it out and making sure your family's safe and making sure your loved ones safe. That's all that matters to you, right? But should there come a day that other things start to become more priority, and you're starting to get more stable and you're starting to become more well off and whatever, you will have already had that under your belt. Like, I made it like that. It doesn't matter who the girl is. It doesn't matter who the other person is. Chance, honestly, this mostly is for men. I don't know. I can't speak on women because I'm not a girl. I only know about guys. Like, it doesn't matter who it is. Most girls find it attractive, that kind of stuff. Like, whether, even if they're fucking like posh as hell, like fucking grew up in like fucking Beverly Hills, it doesn't matter. That's just the way the world is moving now. That's just the direction that the world is going into, right? Yeah. So like, yeah, like poverty is like, there's a lot of ups, there's a lot of downs. That's just the most obvious things, but nobody ever talks about the ups. Nobody ever talks about the benefits, the things about growing up and learning what it means to be real street smart, or learning what it means to be, like to be quiet, to not talk, to not say a lot of things, learning what it means not to trust everybody at face value, learning what it means not to trust some people who say they're your friends and they're not, learning what it means, to like to fucking, not be in the wrong place at the wrong time, learning what it means to just stay cool and be true to yourself and be yourself, because you don't really need to chase a certain type of lifestyle just because everybody else is chasing it. Like, poverty, growing up in the struggle really teaches you that kind of thing. And I think it transcends generation, it transcends the decade or the century that we live in, the millennia that we live in. It transcends all of that kind of stuff, because poverty is poverty worldwide. Whether you were poor in fucking 1800s and you're poor in the 2000s, yeah, there may be a little different circumstances, but you're still at the bottom rung in the whole, like, period, zit. Like, you're at the bottom rung. Whenever, when you're at the bottom, you're at the bottom. Yeah, times may change, and yeah, you may get kicked down the scraps from from newer generations, shit that they consider unnecessary, and yeah, you may have that, you may grow up with that, but you're still at the bottom. Poverty is just a matter of perspective at the end of the day, how other people look at other people based on social status, what people have, what people don't have, and how people judge other people based on that kind of stuff. That's really what it's all predicated on, right? But you already know that. Other people don't know that. They're living from a higher standard, a higher means, quote unquote. Obviously, that's what they describe themselves as. And they describe themselves as so-called better than you, right? When it's not that they're better, it's just that ignorance is bliss. They're ignorant of what they don't know, right? And that shit always will catch up to you. It will always catch up to them. But you know your limits, you know your boundaries. And because you know your limits and your boundaries, you can then go ahead and push yourself past those limits, past those boundaries, to become a better person. But if you think you're already perfect from the get go, then you can never evolve and you can never be a better person. You're stuck, which means you're pretty much fucked. Yeah, poverty is sometimes is a blessing. Sometimes it's a blessing to be who you are and be grown, raised the way you are. And hey, if you grew up in a middle class family, nothing's wrong with that. You know, life is life. But this video is strictly to let those ones know, those youngins know, who are coming up right now, that just because you were raised in poverty doesn't mean that you've had the worst life ever. There's always people who are gonna have the worst life, worse than you. And yeah, you may have had a terrible life, but you still have a chance. You still have an opportunity to make it out, to do something, and to make something of yourself at the end of the day. Yeah, you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know, like, comment, subscribe. You know that helps the algorithm. It keeps on showing you stuff like this, content like this you guys want to see. You know, I'll be posting videos pretty much almost every day. So yeah, let me know what you want to see. Hope you enjoyed it. Peace out.